So going deeper into my journey into the Dune universe, I have just finished reading Dune Messiah, and we got to talk about it. I'll go into my overall general thoughts on it, but then I'm going to put up a point in the video where I'm going to go into spoilers, because this really is one of those kind of books that you can't really talk about without going into a ton of specifics, and it's kind of hard to talk around it. And I imagine every single Dune book, probably from this point forward, is going to be like that, where you just have to talk about specific things that happen in it. But first, I'll give my overall thoughts. The first thing thought I had while I was reading it is I have no idea how they're going to turn this into a movie. Just simply because the story structure itself doesn't seem like it's very conducive to a cinematic experience. You know what I mean? Like, it's definitely more of a character study. Like, it's very introspective, and there's not really like a standard 3-act structure or anything like that. So I'm really, really curious about how they're going to translate it into a movie. But I'm really excited if they do, if Denis Villeneuve decides to do it. So this book takes place essentially 12 years after Paul becomes emperor, and it deals with the question of, well, now what? You know, a lot of stories kind of end with their main character rising to power or overcoming something or defeating the main enemy or something like that. And a lot of stories just kind of end with like, hey, the main character ascended to power. But now this book really, really focuses on what does that do to Paul as a person? Somebody that was not even expecting to rise to this position to begin with. And not only that, but you have the backing influence of not only governments, but also religions kind of hailing you up as this Messiah, which is an interesting title for the book because although it's called Messiah, and what we think about a Messiah being this renowned religious figure, that has all of the answers and all of the power, Paul is in a position now where he is like, he recognizes that he's past the point of no return. And there are so many instances in this book where he like has no idea how he's going to handle this, especially with the visions of the future that he continues to have and how chaotic and how dangerous they start to become, as well as all of the plots and coups in order to overthrow him or to undermine his power or to get the resources of Arrakis away from Arrakis so that Paul doesn't have all of the power. Meanwhile, everybody is continuously dying in his name off-world. Now, this book also focuses very heavily on its characters as opposed to like what's happening in the world around them. Like we hear stories about what is happening, but we don't focus on it. It's very much focused on Paul and also focused on the group of characters that are attempting to plot against him and take him down or take him out of power. So, we know all these wars and battles and this jihad is happening, with everybody that opposes him. And we know that tons of people are dying in his name. But maybe in a very creative way, maybe in like this was the intent of the story, is that we're not seeing this happen. We're only seeing things through Paul's perspective and where he is at that particular moment, hearing news and hearing stories about what is happening in his name and what he's caused. But now he's gone so far, it's like, what do? You can't step away from this position of power really because, you've already created that name for yourself. The name is going to be stronger than the individual himself. So even if something did happen, things would still go down in his name. Paul Atreides has now become more of an idea of a person rather than a person themselves, which is terrifying because Paul is just a person, accepting the role of the Lisan Agaib for everybody around him, and he has so many loyal followers. But now 12 years into his reign, he also has people plotting against him, and you also have the remnants of all of the houses before that don't, like that Paul's kind of come into power and taken power away from the emperor and changed everything, and basically held Arrakis for himself, saying that, you're going to follow what I do or else I control the spice. I can destroy the spice if I want to. But this book is very different from the original Dune in that it's a much shorter story. It's only about half the length of the original Dune. This is about 300 pages and Dune was over 600. So I think some people have called it more of like an epilogue, which it kind of does feel like that. It feels like the final chapters of Dune. We just do a little bit of a time skip and see what's happening here. But it does also have its own story with its own characters it focuses on. But there's a lot of characters from the original Dune that really aren't here. Lady Jessica, which is Paul's mom, I mean, she's still alive, but she's not real. She's not a part of this story, you know? Gurney's not a part of this story. Like, other characters are not a part of this story the way that they were in the first one. Paul is still a huge part, and Stilgar is still a huge part. And also now we have Paul's sister, Alia, as well, who is a bit older. She's probably like 14 or 15 by this point. And she's a really fun character to read because she's kind of like two things at once. Because before she was even born, she was enhanced with all of these memories and knowledge and understanding of like the past Bene Gesserits. But she's still like a teenager in this book. Like, she still kind of acts like a teenager, but at the same time she's like hyper intelligent and aware and knows everything that's going on. And it's like, it's a really fun kind of combination the way that Herbert wrote it, because I kind of sense both. Like, she's a little bit like emotional and erratic like a teenager, but at the same time she's like vastly superior than most of the people that she interacts with. So it's like she had a personality, she had all these other personalities before she was even capable of creating her own personality through her own life experiences. But now, as she's a teenager, she's going through the life experiences and she's becoming her own person, but she also is like capable of knowing all the things that everyone else knew before her. So she's just kind of this strange character, but she's a lot of fun to read. But you essentially have two plot lines happening at the same time. You have Paul dealing with the repercussions of everything that he's created and his kind of moral compass kind of falling away. Also, while everyone wants him to also do a bunch of different things, like he needs to have an heir because of royalty, but he does not want to have children with the princess because he doesn't really give a shit about her whatsoever. She's just kind of there for a political marriage. He wants to have children with Chani. Something is happening with Chani to where she can't have children, so he's kind of like in this middle ground, but he also doesn't want to have children because he sees a potential future with one of his children and things going in a really horrifying direction. So just like in the first book, how he's trying to avoid these particular things that he sees in the future, there's things that are limiting him from doing that, while also the other group of characters that are plotting to take him down are all really creative and unique. And I'll get into spoilers when I talk, because I feel like just talking about them is spoilers, so I'll just wait until I get into them. But I think the main themes of this book really are doubling down on the dangers of, I guess, politics and religion, especially when they're combined together and when you view somebody at such high of a pedestal. There's one of the antagonists that has a line somewhere in the book that's something along the lines of, people need someone to look for or look towards in order to give them their answers, whether that be a political figure or whether that be a religious figure. It seems to give order to the world in some way, but that order can obviously be taken, and then you can take that. And whenever a story criticizes, religion and stuff, usually it's due to the fact that you believe that you have divine authority on your side. So once you believe deeply in a leader, then it's like anything can be justified in their names because obviously they're holy. They are part of a religious group, or they're part of what you believe in as God. And so, like, of course I'm not going to question it, right? Of course it's going to be right because this is the right path given to me by my Messiah. So it's like, that's the terrifying danger that comes with that side of the argument. And then on the political side, it really is those that have the power and resources to do these things, that he has the armies, he has the backing, and he has the monopoly on the spice. And so he rules. And so he rules both by power and by resources. And so then it becomes, well, you either fall in line or you have to fight against it, right? And then also, when somebody's in power for so long, it can also seem like this miraculous thing, but maybe after a certain point in time, you start to see the faults in it, or things start to become the exact same as they were before. So in this book, you also have the ideas that are like people that are becoming nostalgic for the previous emperor. Even though the previous emperor was a total dick, It's like, well, now that we have 12 years of distance, now we look back and we're like, you know what, maybe he wasn't so bad. And probably the same thing would happen with Paul. And 12 years after his reign, people will look back and be like, you know, I kind of miss Paul in power. It's just this thing that people do, right? It's like we're always nostalgic for the thing that we no longer have. And so, you know, that'll go down in history as well, because now he's going to be a historical figure, whether he wants to or not. And in hundreds of years, people will be telling his story. They also bring up past historical figures. They bring up rulers and conquerors, even from our time. Like there's one scene where he talks about Genghis Khan and one scene where he talks about Adolf Hitler. And he talks about the numbers calculated of people that died during their reign. And he talks about how people that are dying during his reign have surpassed those by the thousands, by the millions. So, like, when you look back on history, even though Paul tried to do the right thing, and even though he did what he thought was correct at the time, with the backing of everything and with the resources of everything, he's actually caused more deaths than people that we know now in our history, in our current history, have caused. It's just on a more massive scale because you have more, obviously you have more planets and you have more people and things like that. So it's on a bigger scale. But when you think about it, it's like, well, what's going to be the difference as far as history is concerned? So I'd say this book is dealing with the consequences of the original book, what Paul is trying to do in the situation. Still, you know, he's not like we see him as a person, as a complex human being. Like he has love for Chani. He wants to try to avoid an even horrible future. He wants to, there's many instances where he wants to spare people's lives. You know, he's doing what he believes is best, even though there are deadly consequences in his name. And then we also, of course, get to see everybody try to take him down along the way. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, but I'm going to get into spoilers now because there's a lot to talk about as far as specifics go. So that's kind of like the general overview of, I guess, what you can expect. And I think, I'm pretty sure by the end of this book, we see the conclusion of Paul's story. And I won't say what that is, but that's what it felt like. Now, as far as spoilers go, all right, so I got to talk about specifics about the plot and things that happen in this book because things get really interesting that I was not expecting. First thing that I was not expecting, maybe they mentioned this in the original Dune novel, but it completely went over my head if they did. Okay, so apparently the navigators of the spaceships that used the spice to do it, at least this is how I'm at least understanding this, like correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a character introduced in the beginning of this book named Edric. And I was so confused because in the original Dune novel, we're only dealing with people. We're dealing with human beings. Like there's the Atreides and the Harkonnens and the Fremen, but everyone is a human. Everyone is just a person, you know, besides the worms. We're introduced right off the bat to Edric in this book, who is this like mutated fish man who floats in a tank of gas, of spice, and he's constantly just getting high on spice. And it took me so many pages. Like, it took me so long to realize, like, am I reading this right? Like, what? Wait, what the fuck is Edric? Like, I don't understand what Edric is, because they're all talking together. The very opening of the book, I think it's the first chapter, is they're talking about the conspiracy to take Paul down. So you have Edric there, and then you have Skytail, who is a shapeshifter, so that's like a whole new thing. And then you have the princess there, Princess Arulan or whatever her name is. And then you have the Bene Gesserit there too. And they're all plotting to take Paul down. But they keep talking about Edric and how he's floating in this tank and he's snorting spice or something. I don't know. But like, I'm like, what the fuck? What the fuck is Edric? I don't understand. It even got to the point where I was like, okay, I had to Google Edric. I was like, just give me like a drawing of him. I need to see a picture of him. And then completely forgot, because I haven't seen this movie since I was like 11 years old. Edric is actually in the David Lynch Dune movie in a scene. And I didn't even remember this. I had no fucking idea. I could not remember this whatsoever for the life of me. So yeah, he's the navigator. So it's this thing that lives in a tank that's just surrounded by spice fumes and just is like this plotting, scheming, conniving fishman. Crazy. I did not expect that to come right out the gate. And then, yeah, Skytail was actually a pretty cool villain, I would say. He was a really good antagonist. He's part of the plot to bring down Paul. He's a shapeshifter. There's one scene where he goes to a Fremen's house and kills him in a very merciless way. And it was just like, damn, like this is That actually probably would have been a better introduction for him, actually, than the opening scene. But yeah, Skytail was cool. And then the princess is in on it too. So what they've been doing is the princess wants to have an heir so that she could have her bloodline continue. But Paul refuses. Paul will not bang her. He's like, no, we're not doing it. He's like, I don't even care if you go have sex with other men. Just don't get pregnant. It's just like, goddamn, Paul. Like, that's kind of savage, but all right, man. But also, she is preventing Chani from being pregnant because Paul and Chani are still very much together in this book, and she's been slowly feeding Chani, I guess, like this contraceptive or this poison, to try to prevent it. So that's what's happening there. And that also makes me wonder a lot what's going to happen with the next movie when they do that, because Paul and Chani are pretty, like, tight in this book. Like, their love is actually a very, very important factor of this book and how much they care about each other. Now, Chani has issues with particular things that are happening here and there, but, like, they're all, I mean, she trusts in Paul at the end of the day. Like, they are very much still in love and very much still that power couple that they were before. So I'm really wondering the reason why the movies changed Chani so much, because I'm like, where are they going to go with that? But that's a whole other discussion we'll get into someday, some other day. But yeah, they're still very much in love and they're still very much together. And I really like the relationship between Paul and Chani. And I think that it's very important for the story because it really shows the difference between like how Paul actually is as an emotional, regular human being that loves his woman, as opposed to how people view him, whether as a messiah or whether as this person that's fucked up everything that needs to die. Like, people view him as this ultimate villain of the universe, and maybe rightfully so. But then on an individual level, him and Chani are just like this couple kind of caught in the middle. And it's like, it's kind of like an emotional thing. Like, they have a lot of scenes together that I really, really liked. But okay, the plan to take Paul down, I think I have this correct in my mind, but correct me if I'm wrong. I'm no expert on Dune. This is my first time reading this stuff, so please correct me. Okay, so I don't think I talked about this in the first review that I did for the first Dune book, but there's a character named Duncan Idaho. And in the movie, he was played by the guy from fucking Aquaman. What's his name? Jason Momoa. And he was this guy from House Atreides that went and he lived with the Fremen for a while and he knew their customs and he was very devoted to Paul, and he died to save Paul. He died so that Paul and Jessica could escape. He basically like fought everybody, got killed, just like he does in the movie. So that did happen in the first book. So he gets killed. The plot to take down Paul is so ridiculous, but yet amazing at the same time, because there's so many different layers, plans within plans, as they would say. Okay, so they bring him back as this thing called a Gola, which is essentially a whole new being, a whole new creation, and they make him a mentant, so he's like super intelligent and can basically like he always tells the truth. Also, I think that's another one of the things that he does. He's like highly trained and stuff, but he's not Duncan Idaho as we knew him, at least not when they give him to Paul. So they basically resurrect somebody that Paul knew and loved from before and offer it to him as a gift, right? And that's their attempt to kind of like infiltrate. Like, they're getting this Duncan Idaho, give him a whole new name. Hot, I think his name is. It's Hayt. So, yeah, they give him to Paul, and that's basically their thing that they're infiltrating that's, going to kill Paul from the inside. But the funniest thing is, as soon as they give it to him, Paul's like, yeah, this is a plot to kill me. Like, he already knows right away, like, this is so obvious, right? It is obvious, but it goes deeper than that. So this new Duncan Idaho comes in and kind of is like the main character for a lot of this book. So he's really intelligent. He's highly skilled. He's definitely extremely useful to Paul. And also he looks exactly like the man that Paul knew from back in the day. So you have this kind of odd thing where Paul doesn't want to get rid of this Gola, right? He doesn't want to get rid of it. So he kind of uses it and utilizes it, and also is aware the entire time that they're plotting to take him down with this thing. There's also a little bit of a romance that happens between Duncan and Alia, which I guess you can consider weird in many ways, because Duncan is a revitalized corpse and Alia is like 14, but she's also like hyper intelligent from having all of the years of memories put into her. And also he's just a revitalized, not like a robot, but like he's got like metal eyes and he's just like brought into life in this weird experiment. So, I don't know, man. So yeah, a large part of this book has to do with Duncan Idaho and waiting for the right moment to when he's going to strike and the hows and whys of him striking and killing Paul from the inside. There is also a moment where Paul becomes blind. There is this device that creates this like giant like solar flare flash or whatever it is, and it blinds a bunch of people. Paul goes out like with the Fremen for a while, and this thing goes off as an attempt to attack them, and he's blinded from the entire thing. And they do a couple of interesting things with this. Not only is it just really cool imagery to think of Paul as a character now, like having, blinded characters are always like really cool in fictional media. So, got to have an attempt to do that. It's also, I guess, a measure of the consequence of what's happened to Paul. Like he's got to have some kind of physical consequence happen to him while he's having all these emotional consequences happening around him at the same time. But also it works in two really distinct ways unique to this story. The first is that if somebody is blinded, like in the Fremen culture, just how when somebody dies, they sacrifice all of their moisture to, all the other Fremen. If somebody is blinded, they are meant to be put out into the desert. Like it's basically like they're compromised. Like they just will not be able to survive. And so it's like Fremen tradition to give themselves to Shai Hulud, give themselves to the worms, give themselves to the desert. Like you're supposed to just go into the desert and that's it. You survive or die, likely die. So that's Fremen culture. But Paul is their Messiah. So there's this interesting confliction with it, which I really enjoyed. The other cool thing that they do with it is that Paul is still having visions of the future. And there are moments in which, at least if I understand this right, there's moments in which he's acting based upon the visions that he's seeing. So basically his visions of the future are becoming his present, and that's how he can see. It's if he's seen something happen while he's in the moment, he can recall that vision, and it's as if he still has sight, even though he's blinded and he's just seeing visions that he's had before. So it's a really unique way to have Paul still be able to see without him being able to see. But then the last, I would say like 50 pages of this book, just crazy shit just starts happening. Like there's just like this happens, then that, then that, then that, then that, and then it's over. It just goes so fast. Like the final act of this book is just like bam, 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 we're done. So Paul gets blinded, that happens, and then we have Chani does get pregnant, but I guess due to the slow poisoning over time, she's not able to survive the pregnancy. And so Chani dies while giving birth. And she gives birth to not one, but two children. Twins, a boy, and a girl. Star Wars. And so Paul comes in, right? And the love of his life just died. He also didn't originally want to have a child because of the visions of the future that he wanted to avoid. But that was one child that he saw in his vision. He had two children that he did not expect. Also, there's the trauma and baggage of him losing his first child in the first book. So that's a whole other thing. So he comes in here. He sees Chani die. He's like, what the fuck? Chani just died. I got two kids here. Duncan Idaho's over here. He's going to kill me any second. And then Alia comes in with the shapeshifter. And he shapeshifts and he grabs the baby and he's like, I'm going to kill your baby unless you make this deal with me. So Paul's just like, in the matter of minutes, and also Paul is blind. So it's like, I'm fucking blind. My wife just died. Not my real wife because I got to marry the other girl that I don't care about. The girl I care about died. I got babies. This shapeshifter just picked up a baby and put a knife to its neck. What the fuck? And then it was like, once Chani died, that was supposed to be the trigger that activated Duncan Idaho. So Duncan is about to kill him, but then here's then here's where it all just fucking comes like full circle. Okay. Then fucking Duncan Idaho, due to his loyalty to Paul and the experiences that they have during this book and also with Aaliyah, is able to do what no other Gola has ever done before and respark the memories of his previous life flooding into him, and the original Duncan Idaho persona and memories and knowledge all comes back. But that is combined with the new personality and the new, Hot, or however you pronounce his name, that personality doesn't go away and Duncan replaces it. They both exist. So he's everything altogether. That's how I understand it. So he stops himself from killing Paul. But this was all part of the plan. The plan was to find a way to make the Gullah return itself to its original form, to prove, like, without a shadow of the doubt, that it could be done. And now with Chani dead, the whole plot to take down Paul is to be like, hey, we just proved it to you. It's possible. We can now bring Chani back from the dead for you, but you have to listen to what we say and you have to do what we tell you. It's just like, what? So you take Paul in his most emotionally distraught state while all of these people, have died in his name, and people are looking to him as the Messiah, and then other people are looking to him like he's blind. Like, what do we do about this? He just had these babies, and now it's like, you're taking him in all of this distress, his vision of the future. He also had a vision of, like, the moon falling on the planet and shit. Like, all this stuff is happening. And so it's just like, can you imagine just like what he does in this moment? And so, like, what happens in this moment? He starts seeing through his baby's eyes. Like, what is happening? This is great. He starts seeing not a vision, but what is happening right here. Like, so he has two twins, a boy and a girl. And from how I understand this, he starts to see through the boy's eyes, and he can literally see himself across the room. And he uses the vision that he sees through the baby to, like, line up his shot and chuck this knife and kill the shapeshifter. That's badass. I don't know how to describe it. But that is crazy. Yeah. So basically, Paul has to make the hardest decision he's ever made in his life on a personal level, and that's not to have the potential of Chani coming back, which I can imagine is got to be what influences his final decision. Although it is really difficult to try to understand because now he does have children, and maybe it's because he saw through his child's eye, like maybe he understood that his child was going to go beyond what he did in maybe a way that would not be what his vision saw, but still not being there himself. I mean, I feel like those are your kids. Basically what I'm getting at is Paul decides at the end of this book that he is going to fall in line with Fremen tradition and basically, I guess, die as a Fremen, like not as something above them, but as one of them. And he decides to go into the desert alone, basically destined to die. So he's blind, walking into the desert, I'm assuming just until his death. The thing that bothers me about that is that he will not be there to raise his children. The princess vows that she's going to, because I guess she finds, like that she actually did care about Paul on some level. I don't know. I was a little bit confused about that. But regardless, she's not going to leave these children to die. So she's going to raise them as her own. And they will probably be known as her children. The people will not know that they're Chani's. They will assume that it's Paul's and the princess's. So, they're going to be raised under the name of that bloodline, but not actually be part of that bloodline. So, which is kind of funny because, it throws into perspective, like how important, like we make these bloodlines important, but like a person is just a person, right? Like if no one's going to know that the bloodline is wrong, but they're all going to believe in it. And it's just like, it goes back to like that idea of like, important figures, whether it's political or religious. It's like, we just put our belief, we believe in it, it says like without a shadow of the doubt, like, putting your faith in it, when really it means nothing. Now, the bloodline's gone. It means nothing now, right? Also, there's an interesting moment from Stilgar at the end of the book where during the course of the book, there were moments where it was suspected that at some point Stilgar was going to betray Paul in some way too. And he's his most loyal follower. Well, the way that he betrays him is that Paul asks Stilgar to spare the lives of the Bene Gesserit and, the older woman, I forgot her name, but the people that were in on the conspiracy that didn't die during the confrontation. And Stilgar takes it upon himself to kill them all. I don't know if he killed Eldrick, though. Because Edric, you know, he lives in like a fucking fish tank of gas. Like, I don't know if he took him out. So, yeah, I don't know. Did Edric die or not? I don't know if Edric died, but regardless, Stilgar did that. So Paul is kind of wandering out into the emptiness, and the next book is called Children of Dune. So I imagine the next book takes place probably after another time skip, and we have the twins now probably coming into power because they're going to be the next heir. So yeah, really interesting book. I definitely enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it, particularly the final act, just because just so much like shit was happening at the same time, and I just like, you know, despite all of the horrible atrocities in his name, you know, I felt for Paul in that moment because it was just like one thing after the other, after the other, after the other, and you're just like, oh my god. So that'll be good cinema if they're able to turn it into a movie. Oh, I also forgot to mention, there's like a subplot in this book where they other members looking to get around Paul's reign, you know, decide that at least from the way that I understand it, the sandworms are basically what create the spice because of their existence in this world. Also, yeah, I forgot to talk about this too. Paul is kind of changing the weather of the planet as well, more moisture and things like that. But anyways, there's like a whole subplot where they attempt to steal a sandworm. And you don't really see it happen in the book, but apparently it did happen. Like, it's talked about earlier in the book, and then at a later point, Paul is like, yeah, they managed to do it. They did that. So somewhere in the Dune lore, whatever's happening, I don't know how they did it, whether they just took a giant spaceship that came down and like scooped up a sandworm. I don't really know how they do it, how they did it, but yeah, apparently a sandworm has been taken off of Arrakis and taken to another planet that has been set up with conditions that will hopefully allow spice to be produced on a separate planet. So that's like a whole other subplot. So I don't know if that plays into the future of the books or not, but that throws a wrench in that destroys everything, you know? Because it's like, that's why Arrakis was so important. So if they were actually able to do that, then what is that going to mean for the future? Is that going to be like a plot point of the next books? Like, are they going to be like taking out that like whole entire planet to not allow it to exist? Like, I don't know. But that would be interesting. We'll see where that goes, maybe. Anyways, guys, I really did enjoy the book, Dune Messiah. I had a lot of fun with it. It was a good ride, man. It was a good ride. So if you guys have read the book, let me know what you think about it down below. Leave all your thoughts, comments, and opinions. The next one is Children of Dune. Like I said, I don't really have a time frame on when I'm getting through these books or getting the reviews out. I'm just reading it kind of when I can. So this one was short, so it only took me like about 2 weeks. So I don't know when Children of Dune, when I'll have that review, but I will get to it, and yeah, we'll continue the Dune journey. So thank you guys for watching, man. Let me know what you think about Dune Messiah down below. Leave your thoughts, comments, opinions. Definitely correct me on anything I got wrong, because sometimes it can be a little bit hard to comprehend, and you know, this is my first time going through Dune, so go ahead and correct me. But besides that, guys, thanks for watching this video. Please give it a like and a comment to help it out in the algorithm. I'd really appreciate it if you did so. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you next time.